I don't mean to single you out there. I think it will be good for all of the students to see kind of, hey, we broke up yesterday. We were trying to get the computer to recognize when someone had won, right?
Yep. So it needed us to do two things, which was the cons check for player win, which I submitted here. And then we started with let player win equal false. And then, of course, if board is at 0, 0 equals X and board is at 0, 1 equals X and board at 0, 2 equals X, which means a win.
Yes.
Then it will be console.log player win, and then player win equals true.
Okay.
And we're going to do with all of those, but they're not showing up.
Okay. So what we need to do is, let me request remote control. We need to tell the computer when are we going to check for the player win, right? Okay. So this is a block of code all right in here, but we're not actually executing it.
Yep.
So what we want to do is we're going to actually move this outside of the button clicked function to make our code a little bit more readable.
Okay.
And then down here, we are going to say, after we do all of this work, if we check for the player win and it's equal to true, then alert player won. So what was happening there is you had, and I just saved so you're prettier ran, the check for player win you had in a function, but the function wasn't actually getting called anywhere. You told the computer how to check for a computer win, but you never said, hey, go actually run this code to check to see it.
So that's what I was trying to go in and actually do a function to do it. I just couldn't completely call it. So it wasn't working no matter how I worded it or how I was trying to call it. And I couldn't see it in my terminal that it was even working. So I was like getting frustrated that, okay, maybe I don't have to call it. Maybe I'm just missing something.
Yeah, so you did everything right in the function itself. And that function would have worked, by the way, if you left it where it was, but it's generally better to like cluster all of your functions at that global level together. So all of this is beautifully written, right? This is totally the right approach to it. But we're returning player win, and it's like, well, what do we do with player win at that point, right? And so that's why when we come down here, we say, okay, after we actually put the X in the right spot in the array, this is where we want to run that function. And this whole thing is going to be equal to whatever gets returned right here. So that's going to be your true or false. If it is true, then go ahead and alert out to the computer that the player won. And then what you could do is put all of this in an else, because we only want the computer to go if the player didn't win.
Okay.
So I'm going to just say move computer, move code in here, computer turn code in here.
So it'll be all of this right here, all the way up to the HTML, or would it be just to this bracket?
It would be all the way down. You want to make sure you're getting this line in there, the random row, random col. So you would move all of that in there. Yes.
Yeah, because this one is the check for the computer win. So that would stay there and it would be fine. And then I just have to put another call on the bottom of that, which is the one for that one.
Yes. I would move this computer win though out to the same level that we moved this one out to.
Okay.
Just so that they're kind of clustered together.
All right. So I'll put that one right under there, and then I would call it out after I move those items.
Correct. You got it.
I'm happy to see how's it. I mean, I don't have that many lines done. I got one, but like it was the right format, if and then event not target, blah, blah, blah. But after that, I'm not going to lie, I crashed. I was like, okay, what do I do now?
I didn't even get that far, you guys. My code looks the same as Max's. In fact, like I ran Max's code and it worked. Or it didn't work. I ran my code and it didn't work.
Do you want to share your screen quickly and see if it's an easy, like, one thing's missing?
Yes, please. Let me open my code first.
Oh, you're pulling that up. So we've got 2 more days of JavaScript left. But JavaScript does not go away after this, right? So Ryan is coming in for the next 2 weeks, and he's going to teach you all about how the internet works under the hood, how we can ask for data from other APIs, application programming interfaces, how we use that data to make it show up on the page, all kinds of fun stuff that you're going to be using JavaScript for, but it's not necessarily, specific on JavaScript. So hopefully that gives your brain a little bit of a refresh. Then I come back in and we start on React. React is a JavaScript framework that also is used for HTML. So we have a week of React, and then you have an entire week off, the last week of the year for Christmas, New Year's, whatever you celebrate. And then we come back in and do 2 more weeks of React before we start moving back into the full stack stuff and database and things like that. So that is what is coming down the pipeline. Just wanted to share that with you guys of what's coming up next. Okay, for this, let's start in the browser, Jennifer, and see if there are any errors first.
Sure, I did have some. And I managed to get them taken care of.
Okay.
Okay, where did it go?
Another monitor, maybe?
I opened it, but it didn't pop up anywhere. Oh, that's weird. Well, let's try again. Yeah, I had it open in the browser yesterday. I saw the errors and I was able to fix them. And it still wouldn't run, and I can't get this to load.
Let me request remote. And sometimes if you go down and open up, because Chrome is what it should be opening in.
Mm-hmm.
Did that pull it up on your other window?
No.
Okay, let's try this one more time. Okay, what we can do is if we go
here,
we can just open it manually. Can you drag? Oh, no, that's. Oh, you know what? I think your Chrome is misbehaving.
Okay.
Let's try this. Let's force quit it.
Mm-hmm.
And now if we stop it and restart it.
Oop. There it goes.
Okay. Yeah, it was just your Chrome that needed a force quit out of it. Okay. So I'm going, yep, go ahead. You got it. And head to the console, and you've got, okay, you are good to go here. So the failed to load on the favicon is normal. That's just saying it doesn't have a little icon to put up here. So you are all caught up on the errors, which means if we click on one, that should be working and isn't, right? So this is good for the whole class to see of how do we go through and debug this? Because oftentimes we have to debug other people's code that we haven't written ourselves. So in this case, we wrote the code together, but we can break that down and say, okay, what is it supposed to be doing and what isn't it doing? And sometimes identifying the problem is the hardest part. So we're saying, hey, when we click on that button, an X should be showing up. So let's start at the beginning of that thread and start to pull it. So the beginning of that thread to me says, hey, that's an on click. So let me go find that button in the first place and see if the on click is on it properly.
I'm trying to move the Zoom window out of the way. Okay.
Good. Okay. So we are going to start with our update HTML. It is console logging out the board. It's adding the, it's starting the string out as empty. It has button counter set to 1. And then I'm just going to scoot this over a little bit just so we can see more of the code there. Okay, so we say if the column is equal to X or the column is equal to O, then put out a button with the X or the O inside of it. Else, go to this HTML to update and add in the button. However, we've got this function down here called button clicked that is not actually used anywhere. We need to link this button up to say when this button is clicked on, then go run this function down here.
Oh, I didn't link it.
So if we add a on click here that says button clicked and gets the event and close that quote. Now, if we switch back to our Chrome and I click on a button, we get a different error, right? And that is, there's a quote that I say in every cohort, we celebrate getting different errors, right? Because that means we're making progress. It means that we're one step closer. It's a different error. It's frustrating, but it actually is progress towards the final thing working. So this error is saying on line 40, there is an issue. So part of the nice thing about getting an error is that it's telling us where the error is. So I come over here and I go to 40 and it's saying button inner HTML is equal to X. This is the code we were using before, but because we are now generating out all of the buttons using this HTML function, we don't actually have to make the button show up as an X because we're using the array to store that X information for us. Okay, so I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to take the comment out as well. Okay. And I'm going to try again, refresh. I'm going to click on a button, and it played. Okay. And if we click on another button, it's still working. So you are good to go and all caught up. Just 2 little errors.
2 very simple errors. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And it's tough when classes going that fast, right? To stay up with all of it. So I totally get it.
I spent all of the second half trying to figure it out. And then I just sat here like, okay, whatever.
When you get to that point, sometimes it's more helpful to go over parts that you do understand and just re-solidify that, right? Add in your comments as you're going and then, ask for help when it's available.
Yeah.
Exona, go ahead.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I had to do some work for work. Did you post, are you doing any coding right now? So I'm a little caught up.
We have not started anything yet.
Okay, perfect. Just to make sure, because I didn't see a link on Slack.
We were just going over tic-tac-toe from yesterday. Are there any other tic-tac-toe questions? Okay. How did we feel about tic-tac-toe in general? Did we have any light bulb moments? Are we feeling like we're settling in? Is there any topics that we are really getting or really not getting?
I think we're understanding some of the concepts. It's just, it's kind of hard to get everything from top to bottom and know that you're executing everything perfectly, because we've been going through, we understand doing the if statements, the else statement, and what we're supposed to do. But when it comes to calling it, where are we supposed to call it? And how is it supposed to be called so it reflects it, so it actually works? So when we don't truly understand that final step, it feels like we don't understand anything because nothing is actually working. So we're like, oh my God, I'm like totally lost. I'm like completely out of it. Like, I don't even know what's going on, but technically you have everything. It's just that final step to make it work.
I think the very common feeling, right? And that's why the self-assessment, I think, is so important, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I don't get any of this. And then you go through, and when you're given a list of 10 or 15 concepts, you're like, no, I do get that. And I do get that. And okay, maybe I need more practice with it, but I understand the basics of that, right? And so I actually developed a new project today. We haven't actually ever used this one in the curriculum. That's going to break down functionality into 3 separate pages. And so hopefully that's going to make it a little bit easier to say, hey, let me just do this one step. What is this one step that I'm trying to get done, right? Because movie theater app has all kinds of objects and if statements and for loops and the DOM, and it's really covering everything, but there's so much going on that it's easy to lose just that last step, right? And so what we're going to actually be doing tonight is recreating, let me share my screen. We are going to be recreating, and this is linked in the outline for tonight, this blog project. Now, this blog project is not wired up to a database. In other words, when you create a new post here, it will only save on your computer in your browser, right? So this is not public to the internet. So if you, I mean, the post that you create is not public to the internet. So there's a pretty basic headline, and it says no posts yet. And if you click on new post, you come to a new page with a basic form, and you can say my first post and say it's gonna be awesome. And then awesome shit goes here, right? And we hit add post, and it's going to show up on our homepage. And then if you click the little read more button, you can see more details about the post. And you can go back to the home screen. You can create another post if you wanted to. You can go back and go to read more, click on delete, and it says, are you sure you want to delete? And if you hit OK on that, it goes away. Simple enough. Will probably take us 2 days to build it all. But this is where we're headed. The good news is this is about 200 lines of code, but the code is HTML heavy, and it's very broken up. It's very page specific. Hey, if I have this button, I need to do this code to make it work. Okay, now that I have that working, where do I go next, right? So what we want to break down here is, do I really understand why we are doing that step? Could I come up with that step on my own? That's the level that's going to make you feel more comfortable. And that's why we keep throwing projects at you, right? I said it early on in the first week, hey, these are all the concepts. You now know all of the concepts of JavaScript. The tough part of JavaScript is not getting the syntax down or knowing, all the basic ideas of it. The tough part is actually using it and implementing it in a way that the computer is expecting it. And that's why there are so many projects thrown at you, because it's just repetition. You get to the point where you're like, if he creates another update HTML function, I'm going to barf, right? It's those general ideas and concepts. And the good news is that when we get into React, React is all about a more efficient way of marrying our JavaScript and our HTML together to more effectively show the data. And then from there, we layer in the server, and that's more JavaScript, right? That's JavaScript running in a different place, but that allows you to bring in multiple users into your app and have that information be shared. And so that's kind of where we're headed curriculum-wise, because we're in week 10 of 24. That is crazy, right? But we are rounding out the corner here on our final JavaScript project, where, again, no new concepts, but hopefully we can look at this and say, okay, well, this isn't the prettiest blog ever. It's pretty functional, right? This is another good portfolio project that we can say, hey, we built this little blog. It's saving information. And the cool thing about this is if we actually navigate away from it and come back to it, that post is still actually saved in there. Now, no one else can see that post. It's just saved into your browser. But the only new concept we're going to be introducing here is something called local storage. And that's something that's built into all browsers and is a way that we can save information, small bits of information into the browser so that they're retained when we leave the site and come back to it. The browser keeps track of all of that for us. So that's where we are headed. Do we have any questions before we dive in here? Okay. These are linked in the daily outline. If you want to look at the final code, if you want to cheat and look at the final version that we're building, you are welcome to do that. I also have the demo open if you want to just play around with how it should work. And then before we dive in, just a couple things. I went back and forth of, should we go back and add in additional features to our previous projects, or should we work on this new one? And I settled on, I think more practice with an entire project is going to be more helpful than narrowing into specific things on previous projects. With that said, if you want to challenge yourself, if you're bored this weekend and say, I want to practice with my JavaScript a little bit more, 2 ideas for you on each project. You can make the computer block you in tic-tac-toe. In other words, the computer is going to determine where your winning play may be and play there instead of picking a random spot. You can also make it reset. So after someone wins, make it so that when you hit the OK button, the entire board clears out and you can play another round again. So those are 2 ideas for tic-tac-toe. On the movie seats, you could add, I don't know why I had a review in there. You can add in a checkout button. So basically what you can have, oh, and the other one I meant to add is show number of seats selected and price. So in my movie app, we've got a little interface that shows up down here that says you have 2 seats selected for a total of $16. Why is it $16? Because The Godfather is $8, right? So if you hit checkout, it says, you know, we normally get credit card information and then pay attention to these seats. They turn red to show that they're occupied. So if you want a little bit more practice on a project we've already done, that is something you can add in, is this little, hey, you have 2 seats selected. This is now for a total of $24 because the movie was $12. So that's giving you more practice with arrays. It's giving you practice with creating a div and using the DOM. You're doing very basic math to keep track of what seats are selected, but you are essentially going in and refactoring some of the code, and that can be great practice for your JavaScript as well. So those are just some additional things that you can do on projects we've already done to get a little bit more practice in your JavaScript. And if you do take them on and get stuck somewhere, of course, feel free to reach out to me on Slack or request a one-on-one, and we can go from there. The other thing I will say is that project code is all accessible. So if you go to the URL and go to view page source, you can see there's a little link to my script.js here. If you click on that link, you can see all of my final JavaScript code, how I actually got it to work as well. So if you're someone who learns in reverse, if you're someone who will learn by seeing the final answer and then kind of working your way back from there and picking apart how it's working, you can totally look at the code in here to figure out, hey, how did Max pull this off? Okay, maybe I'm going to try it now that I know how he did it. Okay, all of that said, let's get our code set up. We are going to week 10. I'm making a new folder called day 3. I'm popping that open in my VS Code. I am going to create my index.html, and we're going to hold off on creating any other files. Because the JavaScript that we're writing is relatively short and very page dependent, we're only going to be using the script tag. So normally when we write JavaScript, we almost always link it out in an external file. However, because what we're doing is very dependent on the page that we're on, we're not going to put it in another file. We're going to just put our JavaScript right in our HTML using the script tag. What we are going to do is use Emmet. So exclamation point enter. We're going to call this blog homepage. And I'm going to add my H1 in here for Max's awesome blog. I can spell blog. I'm going to start a live share. I'm going to go live. And I'm going to do one more step before we break. I need to get Bootstrap in. Whenever I start a project, Bootstrap is one of the first things that I add to it. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. I'm going to click on the docs link. I'm going to scroll down and grab 2 links from here. There was a page I was on that made it easier to grab it, but I don't know where it is. So I'm going to grab my link tag from here. Should be a throwback here. Under number 2, we want to go down to the link and grab that. You can also copy and paste it from my code if it's easier for you to get it from there. And we also are going to grab this script tag. I don't think anything we are using is going to be dependent on this script tag, but I'm going to grab it anyway just to be safe because Bootstrap always works better when that JavaScript is in there. We don't want to try and use a feature and have it break because we forget that. So if we go over to our browser and we check in on our blog homepage, we should see Max's awesome blog is not in Times New Roman. That means our Bootstrap is working and we are good to go to get started on this project.
Okay, so we've got that first link in Bootstrap.
Yep. And then the script tag down here.
Let me just look back at my browser or at my Zoom screen. The script tag. Where? Okay. And that script tag is where in Bootstrap?
It is right below the link tag. Right here.
Script. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And remember, because this is our last project, name of the game here is saying, why are we doing this step? It's no longer enough to just understand how we're doing this step. We want to understand why are we doing this? Can we explicitly say, we need to get this done, so we wrote this line of code, and that is what made it work, right? We want to follow that chain all the way through. Sometimes you can't answer those questions, but you forget to ask them. So tonight is all about last project. This is your last chance in the next 2 days to bug me before I disappear for 2 weeks and you get another instructor coming in. I don't want to embarrass the next instructor by me missing something in the JavaScript, right? So if you guys have questions, tonight and tomorrow are the nights to ask them. Make sure we're understanding this full flow all the way through. Okay, so we're going to dive in here. We've got our Max's Awesome blog showing up, but because we're using Bootstrap and because we're using, this is the final product, we are going to be using the grid system. Let me just make a second post. We're going to be using the grid system here, right? So we have 3 blog posts going across, and then they would wrap down onto the next line if we had more of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to move my H1 into a div class container because everything in Bootstrap likes to be in a container. I am then going to come over here and say, okay, I need this to show up. This has a border around it, and it has some formatting on it. Now, of course, we could make this from scratch and go to our CSS, but this kind of reminds me of something. So I'm going to go back to my Bootstrap documentation. I'm going to go down to the components, and I'm going to find the card. And when I scroll down here, I see, hey, this is actually what I'm looking for. The only difference is I don't have an image in here. So what I'm going to do before I even copy this code, I want to figure out what my layout is going to be. So I come back over to my final version. This could be a mock-up. And I say, all right, it looks like, I'm going to say one more post. And if I create a fourth post, we can see it goes down onto the fourth row, or the second row. So we're looking at this and we're going, okay, well, if we are going across, that looks like a row to me. And then we say, all right, this whole area is 12, and we have 3 things breaking it up. So 12 divided by 3 is going to give me 4. That means that I need 3 col4s in order to make those cards show up. So I'm going to come back over to my HTML. I'm going to say I want this underneath my H1. So I'm going to still be in my div container, and I'm going to add my div class row, because we don't ever want to use a column without using a row first. Then I'm going to add in my div class col4, again, because 12 divided by 3 is 4. So that means I'm going to get 3 columns out of that. And before I even put in my card and get lost, I want to make sure my layout is right. So I'm going to say first col. I'm going to add another div class 4 and say second col. And then I'm going to add in one final div class col4 and say third col. And all I want to do is make sure that that lines up the way I want it to. So I'm going to stop there and poll, make sure everyone is following along. If your text is on top of each other, it may be an issue with you pulling in your Bootstrap. But basically what we want to see here is that first col, second col, and third col are spaced out so that they're where the top left of the card is going to go. Poll is open. If anyone needs help, let me know.
Yeah.
Hey Max, this is a more of a capstone question. You think Bootstrap would be like a good layout to use for the capstone?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend everyone use Bootstrap for their capstone, just so you can take advantage of at least the grid system. So even if you don't use any of the Bootstrap components, at least you can use their grid system.
All right. Thank you.
Most of the class voted in. Does anyone need another minute before we keep going?
I do.
I miss HTML.
It will be an HTML heavier project. JavaScript doesn't go away, but this is a good balanced. All right, for the sake of time here, I'm gonna keep going. Jennifer, do you want to share your screen? Are you stuck anywhere or are you still making progress?
Oh yeah, I'm still good. I'm just catching up.
Cool. All right, so I've got my calls in here, and now I'm like, okay, I don't actually want first call, second call, and third call to show up. I just put them in there for layout, right? So I'm going to focus in on my first column and not worry about my second and my third, and we're going to see why in a second. So I'm going to delete out first call. I'm going to go back to Bootstrap, and I'm going to copy this whole section of code here. So I hit copy here. I come back over. I make sure I'm in my call 4, my first call 4 between the two div tags, and I paste everything in. From there, I need to go back to my design and say, okay, what's supposed to show up? There's no image in all of this, right? And that's okay. So we're going to come in and we're going to delete out the entire image tag. And then there's this width 18 REM. REM is actually another unit like pixels, PXR. I don't want the card, though, to be a specific width. I want the card to base the width off the column that it is in. So I don't need this style tag at all. I'm going to take that whole thing out. Okay. Now I come down here and I'm like, all right, what's going on here? Well, I want my post title to show up during the H5. In the P tag, I want some, let me look, some tagline goes here. And then my button down here should say read more. So I save, I go back over to my code. We're looking good. Only one thing is missing. That is the date field right here. So let's go ahead and add that in. I'm going to say H6, and I will say 11/30/22. And come back over here, and now that's showing up. Now, we could copy and paste this everywhere, but we're going to hold off on that, and we'll see why in a second. So oftentimes, even though we know the content that's coming in here is going to be called, is what we call dynamic, in other words, the HTML is going to be generated for that content, I still like doing it all in my HTML first and making it show up the way I like. I want to get it perfect there before I move it into my JavaScript, because in JavaScript, you're adding another layer of complexity, right? It's another thing that can go wrong. And so I like getting it showing up in one place first and then going in and moving it into my JavaScript and instead of trying to do it in my JavaScript in the first place. So now we're here and we're like, okay, I want this content to be based off of my blog posts, but we got a chicken and egg problem. We can't make the blog post show up unless we have an ability to create the blog post, right? So from a user perspective, I, as an engineer, am breaking this down and saying, Okay, well, it's natural to start on the home page, and it's natural to make that home page show up the posts. But if we don't have any of the posts yet, how can we test with our JavaScript and make them show up? So at this point, we put our home page on hold and we say, hey, let's go work on the new post page. So if we look at our final mockups, we can see that there is a new post link. So let's go ahead and create that on our page. We've got div soup going on here, so we got to figure out where we're at. Okay, this div is closing this div is for the column, this div is also for the column, and then this div is lining up with my final row here. So I'm going to add in a comment that says end of content row. And then I'm going to come down and make sure that this div is the end of my container. It is, so I'll add a comment end of container. And now in here, I can put in my div with a new post. So I go look at it, my new post shows up. Okay, great, but it's not a link yet. So we are going to add an A tag with an href to something called new.html. And don't forget your closing A tag. I save that. I come over here, I click new post, and I get this very ugly page that says cannot get new HTML. Well, of course not, silly. We haven't created it yet. So I'm going to go over to my files. I'm going to create a new file called new.html. And this seems like a lot of steps, but really basic here. We're doing our exclamation point enter. We're going to update our title to new post. We're going to go back to our index.html and grab our link tag for Bootstrap because Bootstrap has to be included on every single page. We go back to our index.html and also grab our script tag and put that in the body. And we're going to put an H1 here that says new post. Now I go back to my index.html, I click on the new post button, and I get to a page that says new post. Stopping there to poll, and I will do a quick recap of all of that. In our index.html, we found where the end of our content of our row was, and the end of our container is right here. And we created a new div that has an ahref to a file called new.html. We put in the words new post, and when we come over here, we see new post is now a link. So we go back into our code, we create a file called new.html. In new.html, we use our exclamation point enter to get our template out. Then we add in our link and our script tag that's copied and pasted right from index.html. So we can use our Bootstrap on our new.html, and we just added a word in new post. If all of that is working, when we come over to our browser and we click on the new post button, we should get to a page that says new post. Last call for questions before we move on here.
Yes, so in HTML line, I have it underline 31. So the href new.html, it will take you to an entire new page. And hence why we made the new.html. So whatever we put on there goes onto that page.
Correct. Yes.
Perfect. But they coincide and they can, okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry, I got to talk things out to make it
No problem.
understandable for me.
Probably just helped another student as well. So valuable class time. Okay. So now that we're here, I'm like, oh, well, what goes in my new post? Well, first of all, I'm using Bootstrap, so I got to use my div class container. So I'm going to make sure my new post is in there. And then I'm going to say, all right, well, if we're looking at the final version, it's going to have the name of the post or the title of the post. So we're going to need the title. The date is hopefully going to be automatically generated for us. We shouldn't have to date our content. The computer should be able to do that for us. So we don't need to ask for the date. This looks like a little tagline in here. And then we also, if we click on read more, we can see there's a body as well to that blog post that we're creating, right? So we need to create 3 form fields: the title, the tagline, and the content itself. So we're going to build out a form that looks like this. So I come back over to my new.html. And because we're building a form, we are actually going to use that form tag. And then we're going to create a label that says title. And then we pull out our old friend, the input tag, and say type is text. And we're going to put a name on this as well. So we're going to say title on that. Input tags are self-closing. And if we want, we can hop over to our code and see, okay, that's there, but it's not quite pretty. That's because if we want it to be zhuzhed up a little bit, we can use the class form control, which is from Bootstrap. Now that gives us that really nice full width text and gives us a nice shadow and all of that good stuff as well. So we're able to just knock through here. We can add another label called tagline. And we can take this whole input tag, copy and paste it, and make sure to update our title to tagline. And finally, we are going to do our label of content. And we're going to do a text area. And we're going to put a name on that of content. And text area is a little weird. It doesn't like to be self-closing, but we don't want to forget our form control on that one as well to get the nice styling from Bootstrap. And then from a user perspective, we're saying, all right, I put my title, my tagline, my content in. Now what? Oh, well, I need a button. So I'm going to come down, making sure I'm still in my form tag. I'm going to add a button with a type of submit on it, so the form knows that it is actually submitting the form, and a class of BTN and BTN primary. That is Bootstrap. And if you didn't know that, you could always go back to the documentation, go to the components and look at buttons, and you can see what it takes to get a button working. So if you wanted a button in a different color, you could use that as well. But if you're wondering, Max, how would I even know to use BTN, BTN primary? You want to go through each one of these components at some point if you are committing to Bootstrap and look at what they are. Know what is what tools are available to you, right? Know what is in your palette so that when you do build a website, you can reach for those pre-built components that are already functional for you. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to close out my button tag, and I'm going to say something like post. So I come back over, I look, and I've got my new post showing up.
Wait, so BTN primer will make the post action work? You don't need anything else for that?
No, the type submit will make it, this type submit is laying the groundwork for making the post actually work.
Okay, so what do you mean by BTN primer would make it work?
That it's just the color.
Oh, colors. Okay.
So if you you can see like danger here is red. So if we use BTN danger and look, it turns it to red.
Okay. I thought you could just, I don't know, change the color in CSS or something.
You can. If you wanted to, you could add a style tag up here and target your BTN primary. and, change the background color to fuchsia. And that would work as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not a fuchsia fan myself personally. Okay. Anyone need a minute? We feeling good about this? Basic HTML? Here comes your good old friend JavaScript. Okay, so we've got all of this working, but we need some place to save this, right? If we fill out this form and we say A, B, C, and hit post, it's like clears it all out for us. We're like, come on, JavaScript. We want you to save that information somewhere. So what we're going to do is start a script tag down at the bottom. It's okay to have as many script tags as you want, just like it is okay to have as many div tags as you want. So we make a new script tag, and we need to link up our JavaScript to the form. We need to say, hey, on submit of the form, go run a function called add post and give us access to the event. Now we come down here and we create our const add post, which is going to be a function that gets the event. And all we're going to do is console.log form submitted. So I come back over to my browser, I go to inspect, I got my console open, I'm feeling really good, I put in my content, I hit the post button. Where's my form submitted? Well, let me try that again. So I go A, B, C, look closely at this console. When I click post, it's there for a split second and it disappears. And I'm like, well, what's going on there? The form is trying to reload itself, and it's putting all of the data up in our URL. That's actually for server-side programming. That's so the database can get access to that information in the URL and save that. And we're like, stop it, JavaScript. We want control over that. So what we do is we grab the event and we tell it to prevent the default behavior. That default behavior is refreshing the page and putting all the information up in the URL. So now if I'm on here and do A, B, and C and click post, you notice we don't refresh the page and we've got form submitted working down here. So this event.prevent default is a very common thing to see on a form. Most browsers will refresh the page and take all that form data and dump it into your URL. That's not helpful for us because we want control over that JavaScript. So we tell it to prevent it from doing the default action when it receives the event. So this is a function that is built into JavaScript that gives us control of what happens when the form is submitted. So now we've got our form submitted. We've got everything wired up. We added our on submit up here. We created our add post. We tell it we need access to the event. The reason we need access to the event is down in our JavaScript, we made a function called add post. It is an arrow function. And we said, stop it, the default action from happening on the page, and then console log out form submitted.
Just for my clarity, what's the default action that happens on the page?
The default action, if we comment this out, is the entire page is going to refresh and it's going to dump the contents of the form into the URL.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's actually so that the server, when the page reloads, the server gets access to that information. But we aren't doing anything with the server. We want to control the JavaScript ourselves. So that's why we tell it to not do that, to not reload the page. We'll take care of it from there.
And that prevent default is, as you said, built in JavaScript?
Yes.
Okay.
You feeling like, let's take a step back. You can read this code, you can understand this code, great. Are we feeling like we know why we're doing this code? Are we feeling like, all right, we built the form, We need a post to be saved somewhere. Now we got to do that in our JavaScript. And in order to do that in the JavaScript, we might have learned a new thing with prevent default. That's fine. But now it's like, all right, we got to get access to the data. Before we can save the data anywhere, we need to make sure that we can get access to that data. So what I'm going to do is, instead of console logging out my form submitted, I'm going to console log out my event.target. We've seen event.target before. That is, okay, the event is happening on something. What is the target that it's happening on? So I come over here, I type in my A, my B, my C, I click post, and I see this form in here. And I'm like, well, that form isn't exactly what I want, but if I open it, I can see all of the fields in here, and that's what I want to get access to. So the information that we actually use is the dot elements. Remember, an HTML element is any piece, any tag that shows up in here. So if I save that and do my A, my B, my C, and click post, now I get an array. And I'm like, oh, we're getting closer there. If I pop this open, I can see my inputs are in here. I'm now in JavaScript land. I'm not just in HTML or DOM land. So what I can actually do is go in and use the name of any one of these fields to get the information that I want. So I can actually say, go get me the title. So I come over here, I do my A, my B, my C, I click post, and now I'm down to that input. Wait a second, we know with inputs, we can get out the value of the input. So now when I hit post, I get my A in my console. Now you may say, Max, why did you do that? What you could have done is just added an ID on this called title. You don't have to follow me on this one, by the way. And then say const title input is equal to document.getElement by ID, and go get that title. And then console.log out the title input .value, right? We've seen that before. None of that should be surprising to us. And if we come over here and test that, you can see we get test out twice. Both of these are valid methods for getting that form input. Once we get into React, there will be a whole nother way we use an onChange and a value to get access to that input. So these are just two different ways of doing it, one of which is saying, hey, when the form is submitted, go find this specific field, then pull the value out of it. The other way of doing it is saying, hey, the target is that whole form. So if we break out the elements of the form, we can get access to the specific inputs by using their names and then get access to the value of them. Two different ways of doing it. I'm going to leave this in here, but just comment it out and say this is an alternative way of getting the value of the form inputs. Okay, so we've got our title, our tagline, and our content. We need to store that in our JavaScript. What kind of data file, data format, data type are we going to use in order to store the title, the tagline, and the content?
Maybe objects.
We're gonna use an object, right? Because we already have some pretty clear key names, and the values are going to be whatever gets typed in. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say my const post is going to be equal to a new object. The title is going to come from the event.target.elements.title.value. And believe it or not, it is actually very common to go that deep into an object, to have that many pieces of information chained. Then I also need to store my tagline, which is going to come from my event.target.elements.tagline.value. And finally, I'm also going to have my post content, which is going to come from my event.target.elements.content.value. Now, there's a lot going on there. So to make sure all of that is working, I'm going to console log out my post. So I come over here, I type in test title, test tagline, and test content, and I hit post, and I'm going to come down to my object, and I want to make sure that everything is showing up there. It's been a hot minute since we've polled, so I'm going to give everyone just a breather if you need to catch up.
And Max, is it right that separate script tags in the same page, the code can all talk to each other? We just separate them for organization.
Correct. Yes.
By that, do you mean the two separate script tags in the news HTML? Is that what he's talking about?
Yes. So this script tag will run first, and then this script tag will run second. We separated them out just so whenever you use an SRC, you're not supposed to put additional script information into the script tag because the browser gets confused. And it's like, well, do you want me to run the JavaScript inside the script tag, or do you want me to run the JavaScript at this link that you provided? So that's why we really separate it out into a second script tag, is because we don't want the SRC and the JavaScript inside of the tag to fight each other.
So you could have multiple script tags in HTML?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Just like you can have multiple divs and multiples of pretty much anything other than HTML head and body.
Got you.
I was missing that the first script tag was using the attributes of the script tag rather than code inside of it.
Yes.
I see now. Thank you.
So to test our title, tagline, and content, all we're doing is putting stuff in those boxes, and then if it comes out in the terminal, then it's working?
You got it. We haven't saved that anywhere, right? All we did is we extracted the information out of the form, and we made an object and then just console log that object. We haven't done anything with that object yet, and that's okay.
This might be a weird question, but what maybe you explained it and maybe I wasn't really grasping it, but what does the cons post and what does that do exactly?
So it just makes a new object. So key value pairs, and then we're telling it, okay, the three keys of this object are going before the colon, and then what do you want the values of the object to be? Or the values of each key inside the object, I should say. So we're clustering those together. Objects are helpful when you have a group of information, right? So this title, tagline, and content are all for this one particular post. So if we have multiple posts, it's going to get very confusing to know what title we're talking about. So that's why we group it all together in one object to say, hey, these three pieces of information all go together. They're all related to each other.
Okay. So it's just to explain. Okay.
Any other questions on this code before we move forward? Patrick, is that a hand raise or a stretch? Okay.
So
Bobby, go ahead.
For some reason, my new post button isn't popping up.
Share screen, let's take a look. Oh, you can't share screen. Now you can share screen. Okay, let's see your code. And index.html, you've got your closing A tag before the words new post.
Oh, this one.
So you just need a opening tag. Oh, no, take that out. Go over one more, delete. You need an arrow there. Yep. I don't know why it keeps on putting the word new in there, and then an A instead of
No.
yeah. And then here, let me just clean this up for you. We got, don't need that, and you don't need that. And now we go back to Chrome. You've got your new, oh, did I miss one? Must have missed one. Okay, and now when we go to new post, you're good to go.
Okay. Thank you.
Archel, go ahead.
All right, I'm trying to still fix my index page, and it's looking straight trash right now.
Let's see if we can clean that up quickly for you.
All right. All right, so where am I? All right, let me hit a refresh on this. All right, and here's...
Let me request remote. We've got div soup going on, right? So I like to start at the deepest level and work our way back up. So we've got a div right here that lines up with our card body. Then we go one level out and we say, okay, that lines up with our card.
Right.
Then we come one level further out and we say that ends up with our column. Right. Now, where do we want our other columns to be? We want them to be alongside this column, right? So yes. Because we want those other columns there, it's got to be inside this row. This row ends right here, and the column ends right here. So that means our other columns are supposed to be in here.
Okay.
So I take our columns here and move them in. Now, second column, third column are where we want them to be.
Okay.
The other thing that we've got going on here is you've got your container, and then you put nothing in the container. So we want to take this div out, and then we do one final blitz here to clean things up. We say, okay, this div is now closing out the row. That means this div is closing out the container. That means all of these divs are extra.
Okay.
And now notice your prettier just ran and formatted everything for you because we got rid of all those extra divs.
Yeah, I noticed it was red on the bottom, but I didn't see like any red lines like in the upper right, like around here. I didn't see that red line, but it let me know something's going wrong, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yep. So I would suggest that you use your comments and don't be afraid to come in here and say like, hey, this is the end of row. And then you could come in here and say, this is something like end of first call.
Okay.
And that just makes it a little bit easier to know, hey, what's going on here between my row and the end of my first column? I have two more columns going on.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Max.
No problem. Zona, go ahead.
I have an error on my console.log.
Let's take a look.
So do you want me to go just to the or just hold on, sorry.
Okay, so cannot read properties undefined of reading value, and then it says new HTML 31. That 31 is going to tell us where the problem is. So 31 is down there, and it says event.target.elements.title.value. So I'm looking here and I'm saying title, and where does title line up? It's supposed to match the name right here. Do you notice anything wrong with the name?
Oh,
And keep going. Check your tagline. And everything else looks good.
okay, perfect. I did not know that. Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, come on.
I gotcha.
Thank you.
All right. We ready for the hardest part of all of tonight? This is a new concept headed your way right before break. We're going to use something called local storage, right? So the problem that we run into is that when we're on our new page and we're like, all right, we want to save the information here, but then we want to be able to access the information over here. And it's like, well, we've never done that. We've never had one page of our HTML impact the other page of our HTML. And on top of that, when I close the site and reopen it, I want all of my content to still be there. Now, when we get into full stack, we're going to have an entirely different way of solving this, because we're going to be sending information to the server, and the server is going to save all that information in the database. In fact, we're going to come back to this very project and practice with that concept to make sure we're understanding it. But for right now, we need some way to tell the browser to hold on to this information. The way we're going to do that is with something called local storage. So this code is going to be a little tricky. It's a little ugly, but I'm going to talk through it so we understand it. What we're going to do is we are going to get out our stored posts. Our stored posts are going to come from window. Window is our friend, just like document is. It's one of the only default global variables that we have access to. And we're going to narrow in on something called local storage. This is built into every browser. Every modern browser has been around for at least a decade, very widely used. And we are going to say, get our item called posts. Whenever we store an information in local storage, it is stored as a key value pair. Hey, that sounds familiar. The key that we're storing, the item that we're storing, is going to be something called posts. But we run into a problem here. We actually run into two problems. One, local storage only stores strings. And we're like, well, that's dumb. We've got an object. In fact, we've got an array. We're storing a bunch of different posts. So what we need to do is we need to convert whatever string got stored into the posts back into an array that we can use. That is part one. That is problem one. Problem two is when we create our first new post, there is no stored item called posts. That's going to be empty. So we need some other way. We need to solve that and say, hey, if you don't have any posts, go ahead and create your posts as an empty array. So we're going to solve that by saying if there are stored posts, if stored posts exists at all, then we are going to let our posts start out as empty and make our posts equal to JSON.parse stored posts. That parse does not make sense yet. That is okay. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that posts. This is solving our problem that local storage only stores a string. We're going to see the opposite of that. And when we get to that opposite line, it's going to make a lot more sense.
I just want to add, we have used parse in, so that might help some people kind of draw a parallel.
Correct. Yeah. Parse in and parse float, parse double, all ones we've used. Parsing, right, is that idea that we're taking one data type and turning it into another. So parsing this is taking stored posts, which is coming out as a string, and using the JSON syntax to say, oh, this is a specifically formatted JSON string, we can make that back into an array. Now, we are only seeing one side of that. We're only seeing the parsing of it, but we haven't actually done the reverse of it, of taking the array and stringifying it into JSON. JSON is JavaScript object notation. Okay, so we solved one of the problems of saying, hey, if the stored posts exist, parse out whatever is in storage and give us access to that array. The problem we didn't solve for is what happens if there are not any stored posts. Well, if there aren't any stored posts yet, make the posts equal an empty array. Right? Because the very first time we make a post, there aren't any posts in there. So that's what we're handling here. We're saying post is going to start out as an empty array if there aren't any that exist, which is handled by the if here. Now, post is just an array. So what can we use to add our post that we created up here to the posts array?
Push it.
Pushing it. All we do is we say post.push the post. PPP. Post, push, post. Okay, that's all cool. And if we console log out our posts, we can now see, if we say A, B, and C, and click post, we can see our array is coming out here. So the lines, the colon lines over here are really helpful. This is saying this is logging out on line 50. If I come over and I look at my line 50, I see that's my object coming out. But down here on line 62, I can see that I'm logging out my entire array of posts. If I come down here and pop this open, I can not only see a post there, but if I create a second post with 2, 3, and 4 and click post, oh, that's not going to work yet. Ignore me on that one. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Okay, so we've got our post showing up in the array. That's cool and all, but now I need to store that array somewhere. So what we are going to do is, instead of using get item, we're going to say window.localStorage.set item. And the item we are going to set, this takes 2 parameters. It takes the key that we want to set and the value we are setting. And you notice VS Code is actually helping us out there because it knows what set item does. That's built into JavaScript. So it's telling us the first parameter it's taking is the key, and it needs a string. It is also telling us that it needs the value that we're going to set in there, but that is also a string. So what we do is we say, hey, we are going to save our posts into local storage. And then we can't just take this posts array because posts is an array. It's not a string. So we use our friend JSON, JavaScript object notation, to stringify, no, I am not making that command up, our posts into a string. So we see now 2 sides of this. When we pull the information out of local storage, it comes out as stored posts. Our stored posts right here is a string, but we can't call .push on a string. We can only call push on an array. So we use this parse function to turn our string on this side out into an array on this side. We also handle our else statement to say if there's nothing in there, then make our posts an empty array. From there, we come down and we say posts we now know is an array because it was either empty or it was coming out from our local storage. So what do? We push on the post. Well, where is the post coming from? That's coming from our object up here. Where's all of this data coming from? That's coming from the event target, which is coming from our form all the way up at the top of the page. So as we're trickling down here, what we're basically saying is make the post object that we want to save, go into local storage and get out the stored posts. If the stored posts do exist, it's coming out as a string right here. So convert that string back into an array by parsing it out and store it in post. But if the posts does not exist in local storage, start the posts out as an empty array. Now, either way, our post is going to be an array. Whether that array is coming from local storage or it's coming out as an empty one, that's okay. So now we come over here, we push in the post that we created right up here, and now we've got posts stuck as an array. We need to save that back into local storage, but local storage only likes strings. So we now use window local storage, and we use the set item instead of the get item that we used up here. And we say, hey, we're storing this in local storage in a variable called posts, but the posts right here is an array. So we use json.stringify to convert this array into a string so it can be saved in posts in our local storage. So we're going to do one final step here before we go on break. And I will stick around during break if you need help catching up on all of that, because this is a lot going on here, right? But what this means is if we add one line of code in here, we can say window.location and take that location back to slash. That means go to the home page. So basically what we're saying is after we make the post, after we get the posts out of local storage, after we add our new post into the posts, and then after we update the local storage with the new stringified posts, finally, once all of that is done, take me back to the home page. So I say my first post, I add a tagline in here of taggy, and content goes here. I click the post button and I come back to my home page. And I'm like, okay. So I go back to my home page, and if I can use window.getItem here from the local storage, I should be able to add a script tag on my home page that console logs out my window.localstorage.getItem. And what item do we want to get? We want to get the posts. Now, if everything is working on our home page, after we click new post and create our first post, we should be able to see our post in the console of our home page. And I'll launch a poll because that was the most complicated code we've ever gone through. And the good news is you're about to get a break to let all of that just soak its way in. And if there's any particular section that you would like me to repeat, let me know.
I imagine I'm speaking for not just myself when I say I mostly understand, why we do the last part, that last section, the conversion to JSON back to a string. Is there like any more you could drill in on that? Even more so maybe as into the why, because I struggle with like when I see something like this, like even when I understand it, and kind of like Alba alluded to it earlier, it's kind of like, okay, how do I know like when to do that when I encounter something like this? You know, like.
Great question. So when I'm in new, what I'm going to do is when we get this item out, I'm going to console log out the stored posts. And I'm going to go to new posts, and I'm going to just comment this out for now so it doesn't keep refreshing us around. So I do ABC, I click post, and here's the information coming from the this console log that I just added here. But if we look up here at this console log, you see how this is an actual proper object. So in the console over here, we get the curly braces, we get coloring, we are able to open the object and like work in it, right? But when we get this coming out from the local storage console.log, we look at that and it's like, well, that looks like an array to me. That looks like there's an object in an array. Why isn't it colored? Why isn't it lighting up? Why isn't it doing syntax highlighting, right? Well, if we test that theory, I should theoretically be able to do stored posts.push, and I'll just say the word test. It's an array. I should be able to push into that. So I do A, I do B, C, post, and I get an error. Stored posts.push is not a function. I'm like, okay, why not? Push is an array function. So what I do is I go, something's funky here, that it's not highlighting that for me. I need to understand why it's not doing that. So if I come in here, I can use the command type of stored posts to get out the information. What variable type does JavaScript think that is? So if I do A, B, and C and hit post, now I get this coming out saying it's a string. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't really want a string. I wanted the actual real array. And so what we do is we JSON.parse that array. And now if I console log out not only the JSON, the type of the JSON.parse, but if I output the parse itself, we can see title, we can see the object, and it would help if I spelled console right. We can see the JSON.parse is giving us out an object. And inside of that object, now we actually have a proper object going on. So this JSON.parse is doing the conversion from all of that data in a string into the actual array right here. And then we're doing that in reverse down here. We're saying posts is a real array. We know it is because we just pushed to it, but local storage can't hold an object or an array. It has to hold a string. So we convert it from an actual object or an array into a string using that JavaScript object notation, the JSON. And then when we pull the data back out, it comes out as a string, and we need to parse it back into an actual array or object. Did that help?
No, that definitely helped. So basically, if I had to summarize it in a way that would make this kind of like easy to apply to other projects, is when you have data that you're trying to do something to, it's good to like console log, and see how it's coming in, and then all your solutions going forward would be to manipulate the data to fit your solution, right?
Yes. And if I were building this project from scratch and have never used local storage before, I wouldn't have parsed this, right? And I would have just gone on and I would have written my push, right? And then at that point, I would be like, wait, why can't I push? And the very first time I write this code, it isn't actually because the because it's a string, it's because I never started it. This is the very first post I've made. I've got to make that array there. So I would have made my array, I would have pushed it on there, and I would have been like, great, I'm good to go. Then I would come in to make a new post, and it would say push is not a function. Be like, well, why not? Well, now it is pulling out from local storage, but it's pulling out as a string. And that's when I would say, okay, let me log the data type of posts. I see that it's a string. I need to convert that string into the array with using the parse.
Question. So it's let post semicolon, and that semicolon is there because we're gonna parse it into the array. Am I reading that right?
Yes. We declare the let posts out here because if we declared let posts in here, we wouldn't have access to the posts outside this block of code, which happens to be those curly braces there.
And we use let because it's changeable.
It's going to change, yes.
Right. And if we're to use const, we wouldn't be able to do any of that changing.
Correct. Yeah, it would actually give you an error right away and say that const declarations must be initialized.
Right. One of the things I struggle with still is like, okay, I understand let is mutable and const isn't, but then it's like, okay, how do I see that in action, you know?
Whenever you are updating the value of it, that is let in action.
Gotcha.
I do need help with getting my code to work because it's not working, but I'll wait until break.
Are we good? Do we have any more questions before we go on break?
What are we supposed to see when we test it?
If you go to your homepage, you should see the post information that you added in the new screen and hit submit on.
On the terminal, not on the...
On the console, correct. The content up here is not updated. Okay, let's go on break. Be back at 7:30, and I will stick around for whoever needs help.
Okay. Would you like me to go?
Go for it.
Sorry, I've been commenting out.
That is not anything to apologize for.
It looks messy.
Um,
Understand it better. I can show you what it says.
Yeah, let me see the error because nothing's jumping out to me.
Okay, hold on.
And then open the, yeah. So cannot read properties undefined reading value on line 30. So let's go to line 30.
Hold on. Hold on.
That's an old one.
Yeah.
It's like, I thought we fixed that. Okay, post.push is not a function on 45. Are we, the post is the individual thing we're posting in, right? We want to push in, but where are we pushing that into?
Oh, posts.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so
and now open up your console.
My what?
Your terminal, your console, your right-click inspect.
Oh.
Okay, and on your home page on index.html,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to add 3 lines of code. After that script tag, that final script tag.
Right here?
Yeah. Add in a new script tag. And then inside of that, do a console.log parentheses window dot local storage dot get item parentheses opening parentheses inside the get item. We have to give get item a
parentheses again.
Yep. And then quote and posts. And now when you save and go back to your browser, you can see the info is in there.
Oh. Okay, so this brings the information into the console. Okay.
Yep, it's pulling it from local storage, getting the specific posts key that we were looking for, and outputs it into the console.
Okay.
Good to go, all caught up. Good work.
Thank you.
Archel, did you have a question or are you still working? You're muted, but I saw that you're still working. You can read lips to a certain degree.
I'm just trying to get. I got my index up to date. Now I'm working on the new HTML. So
cool.
That's why I'm trying to get that caught up.
Cool. When you hit a spot, if you don't remember me talking about it, let me know and I can go back through it.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bobby, go ahead.
I'm getting an error that's saying uncaught type error, cannot read properties of undefined.
Okay, share screen, let's take a look. It's usually because something isn't lining up between the names on the input. Oh no, different spot on yours. Okay, so 55, let's go look. In new.html. You're going to your local store gauge.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And now go back to your index.html. You've got window local storage comment or window.location commented out. You can just comment 56 back in.
Oh.
And then let me take a look at your index while we're in here. Yeah, you've got that in. Okay, so now go back to the browser. And just hit the back button to get back to your index and refresh. And now look at your console.
Yep.
You got it. So you're good to go.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. See you guys after break, 7:30. Beneficial to hear it as many times as it takes for it to sink in, right? So let's go back over that. So first half of the code, nice and easy for us, right? We made a form, we tied it to our onSubmit. Our onSubmit we know is running a function down here, a really complicated function, but a function nonetheless. We added our names in, and then we said, okay, what happens when this button is submitted? When they click on that button, we go run the add post. So we started off pretty easy. And come down here and we say event prevent default. The default action is for the browser to refresh the page. And we're like, we don't want that. We're going to handle the data ourselves. So we tell it to hold off. Then we pulled out the event target elements, title value, tagline value, and content value. All of that is coming from our event. It's using the names on all of our inputs and pulling that out and storing that in an object. We store all of that in an object because all of that data is related, right? That data is related to this specific post. So we're in here, we clump all of that into an object and we store that in post. Then we console logged it out, make sure all of our 3 values are working as expected. And we come down here and we say, let posts. Let posts is just a placeholder. That's saying, hey, at some point in the future, we're going to set something into this, but we want to do it outside of this if statement so we have access to it outside of the if statement as well. So now we use our new concept We say window local storage get item posts, and we store that in a different variable called stored posts. Okay, so we've got our stored posts. The problem is we've got to handle two situations. We've got to handle the situation where the posts has never been created before, and we also need to handle the situation where the posts do exist. So we handle that first situation. We say if there are stored posts, the problem is that stored posts is a string. It looks like an object, and we look at that object and we say, hey, that's JSON. That's the JavaScript object notation. But you think JSON would be an object because it's quite literally part of the name. But when we see something in JSON, it's actually a string. And so up until this point, right at line 54, stored posts is still a string. So what we do is we say, hey, if stored posts exists, take that string that we just pulled out of local storage and parse the string into the array and store it in posts. That's what's taking our JSON string object, taking it, converting it into an array, and storing it in posts.
And that's because local storage couldn't read or doesn't accept strings, right?
It only accepts strings.
Oh, it only. Oh, wait. Yeah, it only accepts strings, so we had to change it. Okay.
Correct. So now we say, okay, but if there isn't anything in stored posts, then posts needs to start out as an empty array. No post has ever been made before. So before we can make the post, we need to make the array, the list that is going to hold all of the posts. Okay, now we know posts is going to be an array because it either got parsed out of local storage or it got initialized as an empty one. So we take our post, this big object that we created up here, and we push that into our posts array. But now we have that same problem in reverse. We have posts as an array, which we needed so that we could post to it. But now we need to take that array and convert it into a string. And the way we do that is we stringify this posts array back into a JSON string. Then we set that item into the key set posts into our local storage.
So did we change this type 2 times or 3 times? Because I see it goes from a string to an array and then back to a string.
We pull it out as a string here. We convert the string to an array, and then we convert the array back into a string.
Put the array into a string.
So we only do it twice, right? When we pull it out, we convert it back into an array. We do our work on it. We add in whatever items we need, and then we convert it back from the array into the string. So literally this JSON parse and JSON stringify are just doing the same thing in reverse. The parsing is taking JSON strings and making them objects or arrays. And then the JSON stringify is taking an object or an array and making it into a JSON string.
Okay.
Do we have any questions on this before we move forward?
I have just one. Does JSON stringify? Do you do that? If you have just a number data type and you want to set item in storage, do you need to stringify it?
You don't need to stringify it, but when you pull that item out of with get item, it will come out as a string, not as a number.
Okay, so you need to parse it.
You need to parse it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, whenever you pull something out, and we're going to actually see that a little bit later in tomorrow's work. We're going to pull something out that's going to be a number, but that data type is going to bite us in the butt because it's not actually going to come out as a number. It's going to come out as a string. And so that we'll get to that use case tomorrow. Artrell, go ahead.
I don't know why, but for some reason, my brain is not making a link from the post to posts in plural.
Okay, so posts is our array. That is holding all the posts made across the entire website. Post is this one specific form that we want to add into the list of all of the posts.
Okay.
So what's happening is our post right here is coming from our object up here. That's one particular post. Every
Right.
post has a title, tagline, and content.
Right.
What we want to do is take this individual post and push it onto the end of the list of all of the posts. Well, where is the list of all of the posts coming from? It's either coming from an empty array or it's coming from our stored posts out of the local storage.
Okay.
So once we add our individual post and push it onto the list of all of our posts, we then take those posts and put them back into our local storage.
Okay, so it has the one post added to the other post and it stores all the posts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Bingo. We can't add a post onto all the other posts without having the list of all the posts first.
Okay. It's like having a name and adding it to a list of all the other names.
Correct.
Okay. Got
The
it.
only difference is instead of a name, which would just be a string, we're adding an object up here because we've got 3 pieces of data that we want to store.
Okay.
All related to that same one post.
All right. It's making more sense now.
Singular and plural trips up a lot of beginner programmers, right? So what we want to focus on is what are we trying to do? We aren't trying to take the post and we aren't trying to take all the posts and push it to the singular post. We're trying to take all the posts and push in that singular post. We're trying to take the list and push into the end of the list to make that work.
All right. So pushing is adding something to the end of something that already exists.
Correct.
We have the list of posts, and then we're going to push it to add that other post to the string of the other ones.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? It's the most complicated code we're doing tonight. So this is what you want to narrow in on. Even if you think it's a stupid question, now is the time to ask it.
Okay, stupid question. This is making me think of the inequality operator stuff that I kind of learned a bit ago. And I was just thinking, would that apply or is that only for numbers? And if you want to change it to a string and vice versa?
That's only if we're doing a logic operator. So if we were saying if stored posts is equal to something, that's when we would have to be careful on the double equals or the triple equals. That will play into more effect tomorrow when we run into a problem with strings and numbers.
Okay, so it'll be good for tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes. So it's not directly related to this code, but it's that same concept of we've got a data type that's not the data type we can work with. So we have to parse or convert the data type from one to the other.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was only like numbers strictly for the inequality or if it would work for here too.
Not numbers strictly, but it is most important when you're doing an equality check or that logic operator, when you're saying if something, right? That's when you use the single or the double versus the triple.
Gotcha.
All right. Last call for any questions, stupid or otherwise. Okay. So we're going back to our index. Believe it or not, almost every line of JavaScript we've written so far is in our new.html. Let's change that. We've got our console log happening here. When we go back over to the browser, we can see my first post showing up, right? This is what I submitted the form, and that's what's showing up. But that's not showing up here. We've got post title and tagline goes here. What do we need to do to bridge the gap between this and this?
Inner, right?
We need to use inner HTML, And before we get to the inner HTML, what do we have to do?
You have to get to local storage.
Put into the card?
Yeah, so we've got a lot going on here. We've got local storage going on, but we notice over here that it's not a object. I can't click on it. It looks like an object, but it doesn't have any of the formatting for me. So if I come over here and put this whole thing in a JSON.parse, now I see the little caret. If I click on that, I can see all of the data inside of it. So what I need to do is I need to say const posts equals, I'm actually going to do it like this. We're going to say const stored posts is equal to my window.localstorage.getItem posts. And now I say if, I'm going to say let my posts exist, and if there are stored posts, then make my posts equal to my JSON.parse stored posts. Because it's coming out here as a string, and if they exist, you need to parse out that string into my array of posts. And in order to prove that point, I can console.log my stored posts. I can log out the type of my stored posts, and then I can log out the type of my regular posts. Now, if we come over and take a look at that, my 44, my console log right here, the type of stored posts, what's coming out of local storage is a string. But after we parse it out and console log out the type of my posts, I can see that it's an object. Type of is a little weird in that arrays are reported as objects. So if you're a little confused on that, that's okay. Type of, for whatever reason, does not log out array. It logs out object if it is an array. Okay, so if all of that is working, I should be able to remove my type of and see my posts in here. And the first thing I notice is before I can get into that object, I've got those square braces there. Those square braces mean that all of this is in an array. Well, why is it in an array? Because if I make a new post, and click on the post button, when I go to my home page, oh, I shouldn't have had that commented out. When I go back to my home page, now I have 2 posts in here. And if I pop that open, I can see my 2 posts. But what do we know about computers? They do not like dealing with arrays unless we break it down one by one. So we need to loop over those posts. So what we do is we go to our index. By the way, in new.html, if you have this commented out, you can comment that back in. That will make it so when you hit the post button, it redirects you to the home page. So I had that commented out and shouldn't have. If you want that functionality to work, comment that back in. Okay, sorry, back to here. So I'm going to say for let post of posts. And just to make sure my loop is working, I'm going to console log out each post. Now I come in here and I don't have any nasty arrays. I only have meany objects. So I got to break down these meany objects into the information that I want. So outside the for loop, I'm going to say let generated HTML equal an empty string. And then I'm going to say every time I have a new post, I want to add something to it. And I'm going to use my backticks here because I know I want template literals. I know I want some content coming from the post to show up in, my generated HTML. That should not equal post. That was totally a slip on my part. That should say generated HTML. Okay, now instead of writing out all the HTML that we want, we can go back and thank our future or our past selves because we already know what it looks like. We can take this whole div class col4, cut it, and move down and paste that into our template literal. Because this div class col4 and all the card stuff inside of it, we want to show up for every single post. And we're going over every single post in the for loop and storing that all in our generated HTML. So if we go up and take a look, we can add an ID onto our row here that says posts. Then we can come down here and document get element by ID, go get my posts, and set the inner HTML equal to the HTML I just generated. And we want to make sure we're doing that outside the for loop here, because if we do it inside the for loop, it's going to update every single post. But we want to generate out the HTML for all of the posts. And once all of that is generated, we want to set that inner HTML to what we generated. In other words, make sure the loop is done before we update the page with all of the looped information. So I come over here and I get post title, post title. And I'm like, okay, we're on the right track. We've got 2 of them showing up. I know I have 2 posts, but I want my content to show up there. So I say, okay, where is my post title coming from? I actually need to go back to my new.html and remember that I stored that in a key called title. That title is flowing through my posts, which came from my local storage, got parsed out, and the post is giving me access to the individual one. That means that if I go into my post title, I can say post.title. And I can go into my card text and say post.tagline. And if I don't remember what those are, I can go back to the new and see that here. Now we're going to save the content for later. So I come back over here, I save, I go over to my browser, and now I see my first post and second post. That was a lot. Pausing. I'm polling. I'm seeing where you guys are at. Apparently, I'm drawing on my screen as well. Now, if you look at that and you're like, whoa, 15 lines of code just came out of nowhere. Where did that all come from? Hopefully, we are able to look at this and go, all right, most of these lines of code we already had written. All we did is steal some HTML from up here that we already had, and we moved it down to our generated HTML. Then the only thing we needed to change was when that HTML gets generated, include the information like the title from the post, which is coming from our loop of all of the posts, which is getting parsed out of the information coming from local storage. And why are we doing this step? What we're trying to do is get the information from the new post page to show up that information on the home page. Give everyone a minute there just to catch up.
I'm getting an error for the inner HTML.
Did you add an ID to your row of posts?
No.
I added an ID to my array of posts.
Your div of posts.
Yes, to my div up top, but then my div go like my column or container goes away.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
I don't know if I did something wrong, but
usually it's an extra div, but I'll take a look and let you know. You're not sharing.
oh, I thought I did. Oh, never mind. I'm not.
There we go.
So this is what it looks like.
Okay. Let me see. If, I gotta click through it. Sorry.
Oh, I do. I have this one.
Closing. Yep. One too many there.
No.
Okay. Now go back to your browser and pop open your console. Okay, so no errors. So let's go back to your code. And you're generating out all of your HTML. And then you get down here and you're like, that's it, I'm done.
Is that it?
Well, you generated all the HTML. Now what do you have to do?
I'll document it.
Yep.
And get on my ID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're writing this by memory.
That's it?
That's it.
So you take the generated by HTML, go to the inner HTML and post it into the post.
Mm-hmm. You're good to go.
Why does it say oh,
Because that's what you created
earlier. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. All right, last chance for questions or issues before we move forward. Okay. So I got my post showing up. A couple things that I noticed. One, if I click read more, it doesn't go anywhere. So we're going to need to fix that at some point. The other thing that I'm noticing is if I go over to my code, the date is hard-coded here, right? We know it's hard-coded because we've got these really nice template literals showing us the actual content. What it's not showing us is the dynamic date that those were generated. But we run into a problem. If we go to our new page, we're storing these three pieces of information. We are not, however, storing the date that this post was created. So in our new.html, we're going to fix that by adding a field called date. And then we're going to use a new function called date.now. So I come over to my index.html after I added my date.now, and I come here and I say, hey, show me the post.date. And I go over here and I get undefined, undefined. Well, I very clearly put my date in here. What's the problem? Any guesses? Why am I getting undefined here? I very clearly said date, and I put my date in here.
Is it date now is empty?
The date did not get created when I made these posts. So if I make a new post, now all of a sudden I get this weird thing showing up. Well, this weird thing is better than undefined, but now this is really annoying. I need some way to delete those. We are going to add a delete button tomorrow, but I just want to clear that. So what I can do is I could go down to my console and say window.localstorage.clear. And you want to put in your parentheses there. And as soon as I hit enter, it will say undefined. But when I refresh my page, that all goes away. So if I create my new post and I say ABC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now I'm in this interesting spot where I'm like 1, 6, 6, 9, 8, 5. Like, what's going on there? It's showing me some information, but I don't really know what it is. So let's actually take a look in our console. If we say date.now, it's going to give me this weird looking number. And if I hit enter on it, you see it says 213. If I run it again, it's got a little bit bigger. What is date.now actually doing? Well, let's Google that. Let's say JavaScript date.now. And Mozilla is going to tell us it returns the number of milliseconds that have elapsed since January 1st, 1970.
Man, what? That's so random.
That is what they call the epoch, which is a significant date in time. And every programming language handles dates a little bit differently. And sometimes this epoch is actually based off of December 31st, 1969. Sometimes it is January 1st, 1970. Sometimes they don't even use an epoch, and the computer stores that information differently. The reason why JavaScript uses date.now is numbers are much easier to store and keep track of than the month, the day, the year, not only the hour, minute, and seconds, but also the time zone information as well. And so we're going to use this date.now because numbers, believe it or not, are easier to work with. So if we look at our window.localstorage.get item and we get out our posts, we can see our object has ABC123 content and also that number of milliseconds that have elapsed since January 1st, 1970. Okay, but to the end user, we don't really want to tell them the number of milliseconds that has elapsed since 1970. We would like to tell them the date that that number is trying to represent. So we can convert that number in by saying, hey, instead of taking the post date, use a new date based off of the post date and convert that to a date string. And if we add our parentheses onto that, this is a function built into the date function built into JavaScript. And now we get 11/30/2022 showing up as the date. So again, in new, all we did is date.now. Date.now is storing the number of milliseconds that post was created after 1970. We use that post.date when we create a new date. And then once we have that date, we can convert that date to a string that is user readable. I wonder if we can I get away with new date still based off of the post date? And can I do to locale time string? Convenient. So if I save that, go back over, and don't forget my parentheses, I even get the time it was created as well. And to test
The
that, let's
time
make
what
a
was
new
created.
post. The post was created.
The post itself. That's cool.
And now you can actually see this post was created at 7:59. This one was created at 8:03.
Can you go back to how you converted it into a string?
Yeah, so what we do is we take post date, we say, hey, go create a new date based off of this post date. And then because we've got access to date, we can use this function called toLocaleDateString. And that one's actually really cool because it's not only converting it to a date for us. If you had a computer that was based in another country, like if you were in England,
India?
it would actually put the day and then the month and then the year based off of where your computer was set to in the region settings. Let me stop there for a poll and make sure I didn't lose anyone. I'm guessing you guys are mostly caught up, but good to check in.
What was it that you used to clear it again?
In the browser terminal, you can say window.localstorage.clear, and then don't forget your parentheses because that's a function that you have to call.
What do you put on the parentheses? I'm sorry, I'm just
Nothing
not...
in the parentheses. It's just window local storage clear.
Okay.
And if you hit enter on that, and then you have to refresh the page afterwards, it will, all your posts will be gone.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
So little cleanup that I want to do here. If I clear everything out and I hit refresh, I get two things that I'm concerned about. One, I see third call and second call, and I see posts is not iterable. Okay, well, let me fix this first one. It is good to take out that template HTML that we used. And what I'm going to put in its place is a div. That's weird. Div class call. And I'm going to say something like loading. What's going to happen there is when the page first loads, before it can run my JavaScript and generate out all of my cards, we want to tell the user, hey, we're still loading that in. We're still generating that HTML. Now, that won't show up for long because our HTML is getting generated. But now we're running into another problem that it says posts is not iterable on 39. Okay, well, I don't really know what that means, but I do see posts here. So let's take a look. Let's console.log my posts. Now I come over here and posts is undefined. Well, why is it undefined? Because we haven't made a post yet. So we should handle that. We should tell the user, hey, instead of showing the words loading constantly, we should handle that and show them. So if we say, if there are stored posts, parse it out, else make posts equal to our empty array. And then we can say, if posts.length is equal to 0, then our generated HTML is going to equal no posts yet. I come back over here, I refresh my page, and now I've got a different syntax error. Oh, I forgot to close in curly. So now I get my no posts yet showing up. That's really going to annoy me that it's not lining up. whenever you use a row, but you don't use a column, the indentation gets thrown off. So whenever you have a row, you're supposed to also use a column inside of it. So we said, if we have the stored post, then parse it out. Otherwise, make posts equal to an empty array. Then check down here to see if our posts doesn't have anything in it. If it doesn't have anything in it, make a new div call and say no posts yet. Okay, so we're feeling pretty good about this. I make my new post. I say ABC. I say 1, 2, 3. I add in my content. I post it. Brings me back here. I've got my timestamp working. I've got my content. I got my tagline showing up. Now I want to make it so I can read my content, because you notice down here, we used our title and our tagline plus the date, but our content back from our new isn't in there yet. What we want to do is make a new page so that when we click on read more, it takes us to that post page. But we want every post to be a separate page, right? We want to make it so if we have 3 posts, we can go read all 3 of those posts. But we don't necessarily want to create different HTML for all 3 of those pages. How could we create a reusable post page to show the appropriate content? We're going to start there. So we've got our all 3 pages created for tomorrow. So in here, we're going to create our final new page called post.html. We're going to use our template. We're going to say the document title is a post. We need to go borrow both our link tag from either index or new and post that in, paste that in. And then we also are going to need our script tag. Let's go copy that and paste that in. And we know we're going to need a div class container. And post stuff goes in here.
So this is a capstone question. If you're gonna have multiple pages, I'm assuming for whatever project. Is this how we would connect those pages?
If you were doing your project in vanilla JavaScript, yes.
Yeah.
You'll be using a database, so this is going to be slightly different, but the same concept or the same principle applies.
I just realized this is what we're learning is vanilla JavaScript, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm on my homepage. I click read more and I don't go anywhere. Well, that's because if I go to my index.html and I go find my button doesn't go anywhere. So I want to tell that button to go to post.html. So I refresh, I click read more, and I get post stuff goes in here. And I'm like, great. But we need one piece of information. We need to know what post information is going to go in here. And we can't know that post information unless we link to it somehow. So what we're going to do is in our post.html, we are going to use something called get parameters. They are also known as URL search parameters. Basically, people figured out, hey, sometimes we need to send you to a page, but we need to include more information about the page. So what we do is we put a question mark in here, and that tells the browser, ignore any information coming after the question mark. They still want to go to post.html, but the browser routes us to post, and then we can pull that information out from the question mark and use that information in the page. So what we are going to pass in, believe it or not, is the date. The reason we want to pass in the date is out of all of the information in our post, the title, the tagline, the content, and the date is going to be the most unique. we're almost going to use the date as an ID so we know which post they are clicking on. So we're going to go back to our index.html and we're going to say question mark date equals the post dot date. So I go back to my browser, I refresh the page, I click on read more, and now up in our URL, we still got to post.html. We still have the post stuff goes in here, but you notice we've got this number up here that's representing the post. So, being kind to our future selves, we are going to add in our post.html a little comment that says, post date exists in URL. Use that to show the correct post info from local storage. So when we come in tomorrow, we can remember, hey, where we left off was when we click this read more button, we've got a blank page. We want to show the correct post information in here. And we're going to need to use this date up at the top, somehow get that out of the URL, and then show the right information in here. Because this isn't just showing all the posts, this is going to show the one specific post that the person clicked read more on. Before we head over to terms, I'm going to do a quick attendance check. Go ahead and vote in the poll for attendance. Only half the class has voted in the poll, and we use the attendance results for your stipend card. So reminder to just pop open the poll and hit yes that you're here. Okay, let's head back over to the outline. Doug has already put some terms in here for me to define. JSON.stringify turns an object or array from turns an object into a JSON string, and then parse opposite of stringify converts a JSON string into an object or array. Window.local storage get item, a way to retrieve a key from the browser's local storage that persists across multiple pages. A method to set a key and value strings only into local storage. What other terms did we learn tonight that we want to capture?
Event prevent default.
Event.prevent default. Prevents a form submission from refreshing the page. Helpful when we want to write JS that runs on submit of a form. Other terms from tonight.
Is .find new tonight? We used that before?
We haven't used that yet.
Oh, sorry.
That was one that I didn't want to introduce at 8:20 at night.
To local time string.
Ooh, that's a good one. Date dot to locale date or time string converts a date format into a readable string that can be presented to the end user. You can tell I've been doing a lot of coding when I get to the end of the day and then have to speak English, and I'm just like brain in camel case mode. No more English words come out. I speak JavaScript now.
What about like the variable dot push?
Array dot push. Add a item onto the end of an array.
Get item.
We have that up here.
What about window dot location?
Oh, that's a good one. Window dot location used to access or change the current page of the browser.
What about the dot length? What does dot length mean?
Array dot length.
Yeah.
Reports the number of items in the array.
Okay.
I think that's all we have for tonight. Tomorrow, we will start with a review of all of this code, and we will finish up that that post.html page and get that working and get our delete working, and then we can put this project to rest. Final reminder to vote in the attendance poll. I'll be closing that in a minute. Just need a quick report out of who is not only tuned into class, but who is actively engaging as well. So that is appreciated. Other than that, you guys have an awesome evening. I will stick around in case there are any questions. Otherwise, see you guys.
Hey, Zach. Or, well, Zach, Max.
Yes.